The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. This is one of the most important realizations about society you will ever have. In fact, this understanding is the primary reason for America's unique success as both a free and affluent society. Everything gets smaller as the government gets bigger. Liberty gets smaller, individuality gets smaller, goodness gets smaller, and human character gets smaller. This is not a political point on behalf of a political party. It is simply an observable fact, and it's just common sense. Now, no one denies that government can and must do certain things. There's plenty for government to do. It's the government that must protect us from foreign attacks. That's why we have armed forces. It's the government that must protect us from criminals within our country. That's why we have police. Likewise, fire departments and courts are obviously necessary government institutions. And yes, when all else fails, private and religious-based charities, families, friends, then too the government must be there to provide a safety net of last resort. But it must always be of last resort. When government is the first resort, the first place citizens look when they have a problem, bad things happen. As government grows, almost everything else begins to disappear. The first thing that goes when government gets bigger than it needs to be is goodness. Yes, goodness. As the state gets bigger, people simply do less good for their fellow citizens. After all, why help others when the government will do it for you? This is the reason that, as noted by the international nonprofit organization Charities Aid Foundation and shown in study after study, Americans give more charity and volunteer more time to help others than do Europeans, not to mention just about everybody else in the world. From the beginning, Americans understood that government must be small, and therefore individuals must devote time and money to helping others, as well as non-governmental institutions of goodness. They have to be large and plentiful. Europeans, on the other hand, with their philosophy of big government, came to rely on the state to help their fellow citizens and even their own family members. The second thing that diminishes as the government grows is the character of many of its citizens. Just as taking care of others is a sign of moral character, so is taking care of oneself. Relying on others to take care of you when you are capable of taking care of yourself is just plain selfish and the very definition of irresponsible. And it gets worse. The more people come to rely on the state to take care of them, the more they begin to develop a sense of entitlement. A sense of entitlement is the belief that you do not owe others, but that others, in this case the state and your fellow citizens whose money supports the state, owe you. A sense of entitlement creates two other bad character traits: ingratitude and resentment. The more people expect to be given, the less grateful they will be for what they are given. And they get resentful when any of those entitlements are taken away. The third thing that bigger government diminishes is liberty. This should be obvious. The more government, the more rules, the less liberty. In much of Europe, for example, governments tell store owners how many hours they can keep their own stores open. That's right. In France and Germany, for example, you can't keep your own store open past a certain hour. And you can't open your store before a certain hour. And in the United States, the Federal Register was 2,620 pages long in 1936. By 2012, it contained 78,961 pages of rules and regulations. There are, however, some things big government always does increase: corruption, fraud, and theft. How could it not? Unless you think people are angels and that political power attracts angels, you know that a lot of people with almost unlimited power and with access to almost unlimited sums of money will abuse those powers. So for all these reasons, small government was the vision of the people who founded the United States of America. It is the major reason America has given more people more freedom and more opportunity to live a better life. than any other country has. I'm Dennis Prager. Join Prager University, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for free at prageru.com.
There's one thing Americans can agree on. We value democracy. And in a democracy, leaders are elected by the people to represent the people's interests. One person, one vote. So why does everyone agree that the government doesn't really work for us? Conservatives have an easy answer. Big government is the problem. They say the government infringes on people's freedoms and is constantly getting bigger. They say that if we just defund expensive government programs, we could lower taxes for the average American. With that money back in the hands of ordinary people, they say, people could handle their problems on their own. But there's a big problem with that. It's just not true. Sure, the US government is big, but not as big as it used to be. As a percentage of the economy, federal spending is smaller now than it was in 1954. And the US spends less on government than other countries, like Germany or Finland, that have lower rates of poverty and higher rates of economic mobility. The American dream is more alive in these big government countries than in America. And there's no truth to the claim that the bigger the government, the less free the people. In fact, the countries that the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, ranks as freer than the United States, countries like Sweden or Denmark, have much larger governments relative to their populations than the United States. A large government doesn't mean an unfree population. You see, government isn't a problem in and of itself. In a country as sprawling and diverse as America, there needs to be an institution to build infrastructure and inspect food and to put out fires, to do things that help our communities even if they don't turn a profit. Think of the US Postal Service, which provides hundreds of thousands of good jobs while allowing people to cheaply mail packages across the country. Or think of Medicare and Medicaid, which are credited with having saved millions of lives. So the problem isn't the size of government, it's who controls the government. The reason it feels like our politicians don't work for us is because, well, they don't. Republicans and Democrats alike are working for the people who line their wallets instead. That's not just my politics. That's the academic consensus. In 2014, a Princeton University study found that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on US government policy. More than that, they found that the desires of regular people have zero impact on policy adoption. Not a little impact, not barely any impact, no relationship at all. And it's a truth that has been understood since the founding of the United States. Thomas Jefferson wrote of his desire to crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations. But blinded by swanky dinner parties and big donations, some politicians have forgotten his words. The top ranks of both parties today are filled with billionaires, banking executives, and wealthy lobbyists. Corporations regularly give money to politicians on both sides of the aisle, guaranteeing their influence no matter who wins an election. Whoever wins, you lose. With a government under the control of corporations and the rich, the system has been rigged completely in their favor. In the 1950s, when the economy was growing faster than ever, the richest people in the country paid an income tax of 91%. The corporate income tax was above 50%. But after decades of tax cuts for the rich, the 400 richest Americans pay a lower tax rate than the bottom 10%. Corporations, elites, and the politicians they control will justify this inequality by saying that different rules for them mean more wealth for all. But recent history shows that's not the case. While American workers have become dramatically more productive, their wages have stagnated or fallen. The average hourly wage was higher in 1974 than it was in 2018. This has led to a stark gap in qualities of life. From 1989 to 2018, the wealthiest 1% of Americans increased their total net worth by $21 trillion. The bottom 50%, meanwhile, saw their net worth decrease by $900 billion. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer. For too long, we have been presented with a false choice: big government versus small government. We're right to be skeptical of the people who lead us. They don't work for you or for me, but it's not because government is big. It's because it's bought. I'm Brianna Gray, contributing editor at Current Affairs Magazine for the Gravel Institute. Thank you for watching this video. If you believe in our mission, please consider becoming a patron of the Institute or making a one-time contribution.